Order, order. I'll call Anne Morris to move the motion, and I'll then call the Minister to respond. I remind other members that they may only speak if they've had the permission of both the mover of the motion and the Minister, and as no one has approached the Minister, then no one else is going to speak unless they intervene. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up at the end of the debate. Order, order. Anne Davies to move the motion.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. It's unfortunate, really, that this is a 30-minute debate because so many people have been in touch about wanting to make interventions or speeches, including the Right Honourable Member from South Holland and the Deeping and Right Honourable Member from Meirion Dwyfor, but it's simply, as you've mentioned, Chair, impossible to fit everybody in. But I am really pleased to be leading this debate on this important topic today. Access to cash and banking services is a pressing issue in rural and post-industrial communities, and I hope today to outline why we desperately need to increase the availability of these services through banking hubs in these areas. That's one of three, Chair.
Thank you very much. First of all, the fact that so many people are here is because the Honourable has got a subject matter that's worth more than 30 minutes, by the way, just to say that. But does she agree with me, when it comes to banks, the only goal that they seem to be is bigger dividends, more profit, and they close banks away, and the effect upon rural life has a dramatic effect, as it has in her constituency and it has in mine. It's not time for banks not to look at profit, but look at the people that then their customers that they should be supporting.
Thank you. I totally agree, and I'll be coming on to that very issue later on now. But in 2006, cash accounted for 62% of all payments in the UK, and it's now around 14%, with some forecasts taking it down to 6% in 2031. However, if we look beyond these percentages, we can see that cash still plays a vital role in people's lives. For many, cash is indeed king. New figures from Link, whose transactions account for 77% of the UK's entire ATM network, show that cash continues to be central to how millions of people manage their money. And in 2025, £76 billion was withdrawn from Link ATMs, with 1.27 billion transactions recorded across the year. They note that while ATMs' use naturally evolves as more people choose digital payments, cash remains a trusted and widely used option. Link data shows that the most popular places to use cash remains in convenience stores, supermarkets and payments between friends and family. Will the Honourable Lady give way? I will. That's number 2.
I thank the Honourable Lady very, very much for giving way. In my rural South Cotswolds constituency, mobile banking hubs, including mobile vans and post offices, are absolutely vital, especially for those older constituents who still prefer to use cash, and also for rural businesses needing to pay in cash. So recently, when services in Lavington and Minety were suspended, that was a real problem. Does the Honourable Lady agree with me that in rural communities, mobile banking vans are not a luxury, but an absolutely essential service, and essential not just for the people using cash, but also for the businesses and pubs where those cash payments are made?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, what's happened over the past year, actually, since December, is that those post office vans no longer now accept cheques. So whereas some people of a certain generation still use cheques, but those can't now be paid into using a post office van as we have in our village. You physically have to go to a bank to pay those in, which again, you know, makes it very, very difficult for the more elderly, especially as in my area, you don't have public transport either. Right, I'm going to crack on, Mr. Chair. Link data shows that the most popular places to use, I've said that, so removing local banking services risks deepening financial exclusion and placing additional strain on already vulnerable adults. Despite cash and in-person banking still being integral to many communities across the UK, they are becoming harder and harder to access. This is demonstrated by the number of bank closures seen across Wales, as the Welsh Affairs Committee has noted that the number of bank and building society branches fell from 695 in 2012 to 435 in 2022. These... well, I have promised Adrian, actually. Okay. I'm so sorry, and that'll be my final intervention, Chair. Oh. I'm so sorry. I am sorry. Yes.
I was waiting for the appropriate point, but I'm to preempt the fact that to preempt the fact that the Honourable Lady is clearly talking about banking hubs in rural areas. In my constituency of Waveney Valley, the market town of Bungay has been told that it can't have a banking hub because it's already 7 miles away in the town of Harleston. But of course, in rural areas, proximity does not necessarily mean accessibility when it comes to travel times, when it comes to public transport access. So does the Honourable Lady agree that in determining the criteria for banking hubs, real accessibility in rural areas needs to be accounted for, and there needs to be flexibility in the system to achieve that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. And this is, I'll come on to that in a minute. You know, the data is there for all. Actually, I'm coming on to it now. These closures disproportionately impact less populated areas as the distance to travel to bank branches is greater. For instance, data from 2008 to 2018 show that the greatest increases in travel distance to the nearest bank branch over a decade were recorded for Montgomeryshire, Clwyd South, Arfon, Dwyfor and Meirionnydd, and Brecon and Radnorshire. These rural, less populated areas also have populations that tend to be older, less reliable internet, and experience the unique nature of rural poverty. Restricting, I'm so sorry, I won't finish, I'm so sorry. Restricting access to cash also affects many of those living in rural and post-industrial areas, as the Financial Conduct Authority has noted that digitally excluded older people, people in poor health, and those with lower financial resilience, and those with lower financial capability depend more on cash. We've seen this play out in my constituency, where we have recently experienced the closure of the last bank in town of Ammanford, Lloyds Bank on Key Street. This closure will leave Ammanford, a town with an area population of 23,709, without a full-service bank branch, impacting not only on the town itself, but also on the surrounding communities of Bryn Aman, Glanaman, Tycros, Llandybie, Betws, and the wider Aman Valley. This decision demonstrates a worrying lack of understanding of the needs of rural and post-industrial communities. For many, online banking is not an option. For example, broadband coverage in Carmarthen is significantly below national standards. Gigabit in Carmarthenshire is 41%, compared to 78% in the UK. Superfast broadband is 85%, compared to 96% in the UK. These figures demonstrate that large parts of the county, including Ammanford and its surrounding villages, lack access to high-speed internet required for secure and consistent digital banking. And in practice, this means that online banking is unreliable or inaccessible for many households. Mobile banking apps do not function properly, especially in areas where poor signal and low connections and slow connections. Digital alternatives cannot replace in-person services, especially for vulnerable groups such as older adults, those with disabilities, and people managing complex financial needs. A significant proportion of the residents are elderly, vulnerable, or without access to transport, and the prospect of travelling long distances to the nearest branch is unrealistic and unjust. I've had many constituents contact me expressing their deep concern about the decision for Lloyds to close. One told me, "We desperately need this facility now. I don't think any consideration has been given to the disabled, elderly, or even younger people who cannot travel to other towns. And although I understand the post office will absorb some, it does not provide all banking needs." And he continues, "I understand why banks have to close some branches, but Lloyd's support in the past has been invaluable in this area. With a brain-injured partner, it's impossible to travel to Gorseinon. It would be a major trip, causing unnecessary distress and anxiety for him, and disabled parking in Gorseinon doesn't meet his needs either." And cash too has a social value. Another constituent said, I'm old school. I still like to have cash. I'm giving my grandchildren pocket money, giving tips when I go out, taxis, etc. The list goes on, doesn't it? And it's clear that cash doesn't just to facilitate economic exchange. It creates bonds and ties within communities, an aspect which is very important to smaller and rural areas. So where do we go from here? As the Federation of Small Businesses Wales has said, whilst it is unrealistic to expect a return to high street banks on every street, it is important that new models are further developed, such as banking hubs, to ensure that these services are available locally. Banking hubs are a key alternative to communities that have lost access to bank and building society branches. They offer easy access to face-to-face cash and banking in the communities that have lost their bank branches. And I welcome the fact that the government has pledged to establish at least 350 banking hubs across the UK. In Wales, there are 12 shared banking hubs, with more in the process of being set up in Gorseinon and Caergybi in Holyhead. I note, however, that none are in my constituency of Caerfyrddin, not one. The Financial Services and Marketing Act in 2023 gave the Financial Conduct Authority responsibility for maintaining cash deposit and withdrawal access, though not wider banking services. And the FCA's rules came into force in September 24. These rules require banks not to close their services in communities until they've carried out an assessment showing that the closure would not impact withdrawal and deposit services in that area. Assessments are conducted by Link. And whilst this safeguard is welcome, the process itself seems to overlook rural and post-industrial areas. It does not allow for discretion to be applied to consider the needs of these communities. For instance, in the case of Ammanford, Link assessed there was no need for additional services like a banking hub, given that Ammanford did not meet the population threshold of 10,000 people living near the high street. They say Ammanford has 7,444 adults living nearby, which is still a significant number, but if you remember, 23,709 live in that surround. And as we all know in our post-industrial areas, the town merges into the villages, or the villages merge into the town. Residents have made it very clear that they're finding it incredibly challenging losing their only banking facility. A petition is currently being circulated in response to this decision, which has already gathered hundreds of signatures, and I urge you all to share my online petition. I urge Link also to engage with local stakeholders, including businesses, councillors, residents, to ensure that the assessment reflects actual community needs, including establishing a banking hub in the town of Ammanford. In conclusion, can the Minister set out their response, how we can accelerate the establishment of banking hubs in rural and post-industrial communities as part of its plans? I would also like to know what recent assessments have been made to the adequacy of the cash access review process to account for the unique needs of these communities. Banking hubs are a lifeline for communities that are already under strain. We need prudent policy making in this area from the government so that constituents like mine are not overlooked for such important services. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Mr Cadeirydd.
The question is that this House has considered banking hubs in rural and post-industrial communities. Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's a pleasure, Sir Desmond, to serve under your chairmanship. I'd first like to thank the honourable member in my very best Welsh for Cyferyn. She's smiling at me, which makes me think I may have got that ever so slightly wrong in my pronunciation. But I want to thank her for securing this debate today, not least because this is such an important topic, clearly to her from the passionate way that she has spoken today, but we can tell by the number of interventions that she had, and I know from my own experience, not least in Treasury orals, the correspondence that I get, the banking hub surgeries that I run in Parliament, I know how important this issue is to members right across this House. So thank thank you to her for securing this very important debate today. And I'd also like to thank those that made interventions, or those that have made interventions thus far, including the honourable members for South Cotswolds and for Strangford as well, just who I can see just there. Oh, I will.
Richard Ford.
I'm grateful. The Conservative government passed the Financial Services and Markets Act in 2023, which gave the FCA powers to set up these banking hubs and give access to cash. Does she think that was a missed opportunity at the time to prevent banks closing high street branches in the thousands, which they have since continued to do?
Chair, I'm grateful to the honourable member for his intervention. If he'd let me progress this a little further, I will come to cover the issues that he refers to. I think, as I said, the strength of feeling expressed today, but also much more broadly in parliamentary interactions, showed just how important this issue is to members in here, and of course to people right across the country, in particular the type of communities that the honourable member represents. And I recognise those particular concerns that are raised about rural and post-industrial areas where longer travel distances, as indeed were referred to, more limited transport, and in particular that uneven digital connectivity make the loss of a bank branch especially acute. And I think it's right to acknowledge, Chair, that banking has changed very dramatically in recent years, and many customers have benefited from digital innovations that allow them to more easily manage their finances. And for those who have benefited from these innovations, those type of innovations have increased accessibility, and they've increased convenience as well. I will.
I'm very grateful to her. She mentions the need to recognise there are innovations, but at the same time we've got to recognise that these organisations such as banks and also the Post Office are very much inclined to be self-interested. In my own constituency a year ago, we lost 21 out of 25 locations for vans. The government needs to intervene, surely, to make sure that remote and left-behind communities are not left even more behind because these large financial organisations are looking after their own interests.
Chair, I was going through some of the changes in the landscape of bank. I was going to come to a slightly more negative aspect, if she'll allow me to do so, but I hope that covers the substance of her question. I was going to say, Chair, that the most recent data from the Financial Conduct Authority shows that over 9 in 10 actually, adults banked online or used a mobile app in 2024. But we also know that at the same time as those statistics with regard to digital innovations, as I've just referred to, we also know that around a quarter of adults carried out banking face-to-face in a branch over that same period. And that I put alongside the statistics which the honourable member referred to with regard to cash usage, which I won't repeat, and I make no judgment at all as to I on occasion am a little old school with my attachment to cash, as she put it. But we know of those who still rely on in-person services, many are older customers. Many are vulnerable or more vulnerable individuals. And we also know, of course, Chair, that many businesses right across this country continue to depend on cash. That we know all of those things. I will.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way briefly. In my constituency of Reading Central, we've had exactly the issues she highlights. I'm grateful for the work on this, and in particular the needs of elderly people being investigated by the government, and also those who are both elderly and possibly frail, who find it difficult to travel on public transport. And one of the issues we've had is a lack of access to immediate parking and support for elderly people to get in and out of a branch.
Right.
Will the Minister take another intervention on that?
I will.
Thank you. Alexandria is one of many post-industrial communities within my Western Bartonshire constituency. The Bank of Scotland recently announced the closure of the town's last remaining bank, but as a result, the new Alexandria banking hub opened in my constituency in November 25, a very welcome addition to the high street. So does the Minister agree that this ensures crucial access to cash and face-to-face banking services for residents and businesses, especially the elderly and vulnerable in Alexandria, Western Bartonshire, and it adds to our pride in place high street work?
Chair,
the honourable friend raises very, very important issues, including in relation to pride of place. And I think what's so important about this debate and about banking hubs is because there is an interaction between access to cash and indeed ability to speak to a bank or a community banker, and indeed the health of our high streets and how people feel about their towns and about their communities. Just ask me first, yeah, sorry.
My constituency of North West Leicestershire is a strong industrial path, including my main town of Colville, not entirely rural. It doesn't qualify for a banking hub. Lloyds is abandoning my community and it will close in June this year, despite how busy and well used it is on a main high street. Does the Minister agree with me we need to ensure gaps in bank provision are filled as soon as possible with banking hubs, but also that banking hub assessment should include the access for business banking, because that is what we really do lose when a main high street bank goes off the high street?
Chair, you'll forgive me for not commenting on individual cases, but safe to say I am familiar with the circumstances that my honourable friend refers to, and I know the urgent nature of some of the issues that she... I'm going to go here and then I'll go over there, if that's all right.
As well as those people who are elderly and disadvantaged, the library make clear that people with mental health difficulties, physical difficulties, people who rely on others to pay for them, there are many groups beyond the elderly and the disadvantaged that struggle, and they struggle all the more in rural areas like Lincolnshire, which is why 98% of MPs surveyed have said that they think there should be a banking hub wherever the last branch has closed. And when 98% of MPs think something, a wise government listens carefully and acts quickly.
The honourable member gives me good advice as ever, and as ever, indeed, I shall pay close attention to what he says. He refers rightly to issues of different issues of aspects of vulnerability, I should say, and I'll come to some of those, if I might, slightly later on in my remarks. But Chair, I think what is very clear from the nature of those interventions that we've just had is, again, how passionately people members right across this House feel about all of these issues. But also, I think it makes it, if I might just finish this sentence, I think it makes it ever more clear, or shows, I should say, why the government has been clear that it's critical that people have access to the services that they need. I shall take this intervention and then I'll go on to the work that the government is doing.
Thank you, Minister, for giving way, and I must pay tribute to the honourable member for raising this important debate. And just to re-echo the point made by my colleague from North West Leicestershire, that I come here today from discussions with Lloyds Bank, who have decided to close the Benbecula branch of Scotland in my constituency, 2 bank closures in a few short years. But the closure decision appears as irreversible as it is regrettable. But the danger now is that we will have no banking hub because the banking population of Uist is too small to fit within the parameters of a banking hub. And will the Minister ensure that the banks and Link and associated authorities expand and adjust their parameters so that sparsely populated and island populations continue to have services, banking services available to them?
Chair, if I might, I'll come to the yes. I will give way. Yeah.
Thank you for giving way. Should be very generous. But just on that very specific point raised by my colleague from the Western Isles, similarly in Alnwick and Berwick, in my constituencies, there is an issue to do with the diminution of high street banking. And with there were 3 banks in Alnwick only 3 years ago, and there are now none. And 1 is now closing in Berwick. So on the criteria for community banking, would the government look at the Link and other such services and say not just access to cash, but access to banking should be a statutory right?
I can answer that very directly and say, and I'm grateful for the intervention, I should say, and we keep these issues under review, as my honourable friend would expect us to do. Look, I think, Chair, I was prior to those interventions, I was talking about action that the government has taken, and it's our recognition of the importance of banking services to local communities that underpins what we put in our manifesto, which is that pledge to work with industry, as the Honourable Member rightly referred to get to at least 350 banking hubs across the country. Yes.
Thank you for being so exceptionally generous with her time. Just to emphasise that point on the banking hubs, I've been particularly frustrated about the town of Haltwhistle in my constituency, which is a smaller town but has a huge area that looks to it from Slaggyford and Guilsford and Gilsland up to communities nearer the Scottish border. It is too small on current criteria to attract a banking hub by itself, but the businesses that look to it now are forced to look to Hexham or further afield to Newcastle or indeed to the west of Carlisle, and it risks strangling the growth of economic enterprise in the west of Northumberland, which is already, I must say, very poorly supported by Northumberland County Council.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his intervention, and I think he sums up very well the links between some of the issues that we're discussing today and wider economic growth, which, as honourable members will know, is this government's principal mission. Any hope I might have had, Chair, of reciting the names of those that and names of the constituencies of those that have contributed to this debate is fast evaporating. What I will say, on our 350 banking hubs across the over the course of this Parliament, it's very important to note that this is a floor rather than a ceiling. So it's entirely possible that the 350 target is surpassed. Over 270 hubs have already been announced, and over 210 are already now open. And in Wales, specifically, as I think was referred to, there are 17 banking hubs that have been announced, of which 12 are already open. And banking hubs don't just provide assisted cash services through post office staff and allow customers to withdraw and deposit cash. They also, of course, as honourable members will know, provide community bankers from customers' banks, offering customers the opportunity to speak to someone face to face about their banking needs as they would in a traditional bank branch. I was in the banking hub in Warwick just last week, and I was able to meet with community bankers and indeed customers who were coming in, and I saw firsthand that very important benefit that having someone there that people were able to engage with brought to those that were coming into the branch. I will give way.
Just on that point, can I just agree wholeheartedly with her that it is important that these hubs offer that wider range of banking services, and I'd perhaps just draw her attention to the plight of those community bank account holders who will often need to have that access to that service that currently is only available in a bank branch and could be provided in a banking hub in future.
Chair, thank you. I'm grateful to the honourable member for his intervention. I think he makes a strong point. I'm rapidly cutting bits out of my speech, but I'm going to cover as much as I possibly can. Honourable members will know that some hubs offer services which others don't, and we have been exploring with the banks how services might be expanded and improved where there is a community need for that to happen. So just last month I held a roundtable with a large number of banks with Cash Access UK and with UK Finance to discuss the services that are currently provided in banking hubs, including access to printing facilities, for example, which we know are really valued in some communities in particular. Saturday opening hours as well was another example of things that were discussed. But overall, that discussion with the banks was about how we improve the functionality of hubs. And we also discussed what the industry might be able to do to raise awareness of the location of hubs, which we know in some areas isn't as high as it might be, alongside awareness of the services that they offer to their customers. Chair, if I might, I just want to spend a second addressing the important points raised about digital exclusion and indeed particular vulnerabilities. While many people benefit from digital services, as a government, we of course very much recognise, and this is inherent in our financial inclusion strategy that we published at the end of last year, we of course recognise that many people face very real barriers, and indeed that's exactly why digital inclusion sat alongside access to banking as a core pillar of that financial inclusion strategy, which, as I said, was published at the end of last year. The financial inclusion strategy includes an industry-led working group on inclusive design to improve accessibility right across financial products. Chair.